City Council work session for August 22nd, 2023.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Stephen Mayor, I think it's Vice Mayor. I think that's the official term here.
Pro tem.
Okay.
That's what I said.
Pro
I'm not
term.
sure what it means.
Okay. And Council, glad to have you here tonight. Tonight, again, it's going to be mostly going through worksheets, Excel files. We do have Gary, Chief Hendrickson, who is going to be joining us via Teams. He'll join us when he can. The mayor is also not available tonight, so he does have the invite if he's able to join in. Great. I am sharing the screen so that everybody at home and anybody who watches the work session can see this stuff. So the plan was today is answer any questions you may have with where we're at so far. It's going to be just general discussion about everything on the plate that we've talked about so far. This is the plan is to have this be the last budget work session before we adopt a preliminary tax levy. The preliminary tax levy will be adopted, plan to be adopted on the 12th of September, and it will be the high number that people will see on their tax statement. Again, we can always go down, but if we go down at the preliminary tax levy, we cannot go up after that. So the idea is to try to keep us so that we're not handcuffing ourselves long term if we make any changes from here until now without having any payment management dollars or having anything else related to studies or projects we have going on that we don't know about. We can always bring it down if something comes through later on or readjust dollars. That doesn't mean we can't move money from payment management to the general fund, to EDA, or whatever we want to do. We can move money around anywhere we want. This is the total dollar amount that we have as a cap. So happy to answer the questions, stuff that's been sent out. Otherwise, department heads and myself are here to answer any questions, and I'll run the Excel files for any questions you may have about different scenarios and whatever else. So I'll give the floor to anybody else who'd like it. Thank you.
You want to start? Scott?
All right, I'll go. I don't care. Throw my idea out there and we'll go from there. I personally would like to stay somewhere in the 16 to 18 range for the increase. And I think that's doable. I do have a couple of them. Well, number one, a couple things that I wish we had already. The fire there was a fire study done roughly a year ago, and we still don't have those results.
Yep, we spent the first roughly 4 to 4.5 months dealing with personnel and changes and concerns and fire department stuff. So roughly the first 4 to 4.5 months of that time frame of being approved, it was not even touched. Mm-hmm. After that, we had to go through, I will say, layers of paperwork because everything was on a paper prior to Chief Hendrickson coming on board, and also coordinating with the county, which was also very difficult. So I will say he has all the information, or they do, and the goal is going to get to be as soon as possible, but we have not gotten it due to the fact of just getting information has been extremely cumbersome because we're looking back at paper records, running through incidents, running through calls, grabbing information from what's been done for SOPs, SOGs, processes, procedures, and none of that is either A, documented, or B, in any sort of file that's easily accessible. So Gary did spend quite a few months, I will say, gathering information, grabbing from the county, grabbing from wherever. But again, to your point, I agree. It would be great to have, and don't disagree that it would be fantastic to have for this meeting. But with information we don't have, we can push them as fast as we can, but when they don't have the information, we can't expect a good result. Again, information in is, if it's poor or slow, it's going to come back to us poor and slow. So try to get them all the information.
They give you a date? Sorry, Scott. Did they actually give you a date? Like,
they did
it
not.
will be done by this date at the very latest?
No.
Okay. I think they owe us that in the bare bones minimum of like.
We can ask for an update for sure, and I'm sure
an
they
update, a deadline.
Well,
Yeah.
There's a difference in the two. An update, yeah, we're working on it. We'll get you as soon as possible. A deadline
right,
is
as
we'll
in
have it by
an
X.
update for a deadline when they think they can get it to us. Realistically, now that they have all the information, I think they got all of the final information from the county at the end of June. Was when we finally got all the information. Took about 3.5 to 4 months to get all of that information just from the county, because we had to verify our records with what the county had for calls. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, can you hear me?
But I think an update with a deadline is needed and most certainly can be required.
I mean, we can work
Zach,
around
can you
that
hear me?
now, I think. But
Yep.
Another one that concerns me greatly is that road study, and I just think that the pavement management fund is going to be probably, in my opinion, $300,000-400,000 light. Now, a guy can put money there And if all of a sudden 6 months from now you don't need it, then you can move it somewhere else. So, I mean, I would just feel more comfortable. I mean, next year we're spending 1.2 on road work. This new last minute deal for the council meeting tonight is going to take about 100 of that. And there's 1.3.
26,000 of that. That's for
Is that it?
Yes.
The rest of it is
Yes, correct. Out of the pavement fund.
only 26 is coming,
Correct.
not the 88.
Nope.
But that's a different.
We'll talk.
Okay.
We'll talk
Okay,
about
yeah.
We'll talk about
Okay, so there it's there.
Yep.
There's nothing that, in my opinion, we can do about it. Roughly the outline of cost increases was about 300K through all departments.
Mom, there, coming.
Gary, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes. So we're hopefully you can hear us and we're good to go. So we can hear you.
Yep, I can hear you fine.
Okay, and there's nothing we can do about any of that. That's just the way it is, and it's 300K that it's got to be eaten up someplace. So, I think the way that I have to do this as council is come up with a number that here you get this, and you get this, and whatever you want to do with it, that's your business, you know. And that's where I'm at. So,
Okay.
and I've got them numbers outlined
That's good.
if you want them.
Happy to take anything you provide.
I think police gets about 400 with your cost increases. Fire, I've got about 75. And Marty, I got no problem with any of yours. Your 180 that you want. You're golden.
That's a first.
Thank you, Scott.
We're recording, right?
Yeah. It is on the record.
You have to rewatch this.
I'll rewatch it every day.
And I would, however, and this is just, and I know eventually, maybe someday we'll get there, hopefully before I'm dead, but I think our Stevens Park needs a facelift before. This council has not seen anything about this $5 million Stevens Park plan. I mean, what are we getting for $5 million? I have no idea. And it's in 2027.
Okay. Yep. I was like, I want to make sure I understand
Yep,
what phase,
yep.
whatever it is.
Whatever it is, but it's $5 million.
Yep,
That's
yep.
what's in here. And what are we getting for that? And can we gradually fill some of that in? I mean, our city community involvement is absolutely, in my opinion, horrible. And I think we can dress that up with some dollars put into outdoor concerts, some sort of activities. I mean, they've been horrible for ages.
Sure.
And to me, that would take some dollars, and a $500,000 would boost Stevens along nicely, I think, with some sort of a, and I'm not saying no $1 million amphitheater, but some sort of a stage with a shelter. And clearly, you got to have some sort of a sound system. I mean, to me, the entertainment area down on the river is the perfect location for it, but it's this big. There's just nothing there. I mean, it's almost useless unless you got a two-piece band, and then some sort of a shelter over it. Now, can that be retrofitted to make some sort of a? I don't know if you've seen, like, Buffalo's got a really nice brick building.
Yeah.
And I have no idea what that costs, but $300,000 has got to be able to buy that, maybe.
I don't know. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to commit to anything here.
No,
but
I know,
I'll definitely
but
look
whatever, yeah.
into that if we want to expand that area.
It can't be a metal building. It can't be a metal roof because then it would be too noisy and the acoustics would be horrible. But I mean, something, just to kind of help that out. I mean,
There was a kind of an amphitheater in the master plan?
Yeah.
Was it located there, or was it
over in the west
further?
corner.
I think that I think.
By the two silos, right?
Yeah, there's one in the two silos, and I think there was this one as well. But this was going to be more of a fishing dock and that kind of thing on the original plan. And then I think we moved it to having the amphitheatre there. But it's not to say that there's not a space for another one on the other side there.
Well, the spot where the little platform is now,
Yeah.
it's the best spot in the park.
I don't disagree.
That's where it should be, right there. And it can't face so that you're entertainment is going into the west, because all your events are in the evening, and the sun will be shining right in their face.
Can we build anything that close to the river?
We would have to look at what it is. If it's in the floodplain, you can't have anything that's going to restrict water flow. That's why it is the way it is. We'd have to look at where that could be as far as a floodplain and what kind of structure it could be. There would be some limitations on what it could be.
I mean, when we designed that thing, I mean, to me, it should have been a hill with your entertainment center and some sort of a hill with all tiered up.
Mm-hmm.
You're almost describing what Champlain is. Just put
I don't
it on
know.
the
I
river.
haven't seen it. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I guess.
I think Anoka has that too.
Yeah, I don't disagree. That stuff sounds nice. I would say from a prioritization standpoint, it's pretty. To me, it's pretty low. I mean, Champlain just built that really nice amphitheater the next city over, which is exactly what you're describing. And they've got 3+ times the number of citizens we do.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I think long-term planning, it makes sense to get that in there. I don't know if that's going to play a part in this year's budget in particular. Unless you're saying you want to start putting money aside now for it.
Yeah, but you could certainly put money into. I mean, there's no better time to. And you'll put the recording on. There's no better time to spend money than when you have money that doesn't really cost anything. I mean, there's 1.7 roughly there that taxes don't necessarily go up. It's just more revenue that's coming in. Now, I'm not saying I want to spend the whole 1.7, but that's the best time when you have it, that you don't got to go and levy for it.
Yeah, so you're talking about using part of that 1.7.
1.7,
this
yeah.
year's
Yeah,
towards.
because I've got it figured out that I can use about 1.2, and there's still 450, 500 left over.
Yeah, I guess. So, yeah, I'll let you finish. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just
Pretty much about it. And that's me in a nutshell and what I'd like to go after.
So I took a different approach. So after the last one of these work sessions we had, there was some conversation around how new spending should only come from new homes, and that existing homes shouldn't really bear a lot of that impact. Right? I'm kind of paraphrasing. I don't know the exact words that we're using, so I'm paraphrasing. So I went through pretty much everything that was on the sheet, these sheets for cost. I didn't include the things that like this goes up, but that goes down because they offset each other. And I took all those costs and put them in like what we'd have to spend money on even if there was no growth. And then what is growth kind of drives. And I think we're underestimating what we need if there was no new growth. And I'll give you, I think as a prime example, one of the officers that the chief is asking for is an inspector. We need an inspector because the county cut the funding for the inspector. So investigator. I'm sorry.
Investigator.
Investigator. Yes.
All right.
Investigator, because the county funded it. So even if there's no new growth, we'd have to have that role next year, in my opinion. This is Matt's view of it. So if there was zero new growth, we'd still have to cover the cost of that individual. I went through and also looked at adding up all the things that weren't new per se, but increase in wages, workman's comp, fuel, repairs, those kind of things. I got $604,000 when I added it up. And those are costs that we'd bear pretty much even if there was no growth. Maybe a little less fuel because there's less roads. One could argue that, but I think it'd be minimal because that growth in fuel costs, I'm guessing, is coming more from fuel costs more than it did a year ago. Parts cost more than they did a year ago. Those kind of things. We have to pay more in wages. It's a negotiated contract. Those kind of things. And so
Yeah, I don't have the 143 increased in wages included in that 300.
yeah, okay, I've got increase in wage. I've got I kind of went through it from that perspective. And then I looked at the other things that were being asked for, like one of the officers, I could see an argument that the traffic officer is probably needed whether there's no growth or not in the past year. I think we've heard from almost every resident, if you've knocked on the door, that people are going fast in front of my house. What fast is different than everyone, but we hear it whether you live on Fernbrook or you live, in a development. So I think having that individual and knowing that hopefully half, if not more, of the individual's wages will be compensated for, I think that's a city cost, if you will. And then I took the other two officers and put those two officers in these we need because of growth. So the growth should be paying for these two officers as we look at this. I then looked at what is now the assistant chief / fire marshal and said, well, we look back a decade, we haven't been doing inspections on existing businesses, right? We got this an email from Zach a while ago. So that's something in Matt's opinion, is a priority, and we should be doing. Like, people should feel safe walking to businesses knowing that there's no fire hazards in there, that someone's looked to make sure. There's also the safety for the fire department themselves. I know they had, and the chiefs online, but we had an issue where a mezzanine was added in I think it was a commercial building. You probably know.
Building,
Yep, and the fire department didn't know it was there, and so that could have been an issue. Thankfully, it wasn't. But having those fire inspections, I think, is important for all the citizens, whether they're new to the city or not. The assistant fire chief, I would say, is probably because we have growth, right? And so I split the cost of that down the middle. I then went and looked at the part-time employees that Public Works is asking for. I would argue maybe one of those could be a seasonal, so versus 2 part-time, which I think, Zach, you said would save us like $18,000 or something like that.
Yeah, it's the rough cost. The difference is because of A, number of hours, and B, it's because they don't have to pay them para.
Yep.
So they para exempt, which means we don't have to cover 7.5% of their retirement basically to put towards a para.
Because I hear that we're getting the intersection. That's a lot more work, especially in the summer. So having a seasonal person help in the summer, that I think would help get us there. It may not be exactly what you're asking for, and I understand that and can see that as well.
Interchange, you mean, not intersection?
Yeah, interchange.
Okay,
Yep.
Correct.
And then, so when I break this out, I look at the costs, and of the costs that are out there, approximately 66% of those costs we would have if we had no growth whatsoever. And the remaining 35% of those costs are due to growth. And when I look at the revenue that's coming in, 66% of the new revenue, or 60%, sorry, is from growth, and 40%, if we leave it, is from existing homes. And so I do feel like I know oftentimes people say, well, we get all this growth and we're not getting any benefit. And I think when I look at the way that the budget is split out today, people that have lived here, whether you lived here for a year, you've lived here for 30, 40 years, you're getting extra services to some extent at a subsidized cost comparatively to where the revenue flows are coming in. So that's what I spent some time looking at. I also spent some time having Zach look at this, which I think all of you got emailed to you too. But in 2018, we had 1,500 homes. In 2023, we have 3,000. I'm rounding. So basically double the amount of homes. I don't think we need anywhere near double the amount of staff. I don't think anyone's recommending that. There should be some advantage to scale here. But in my mind, one more police officer for twice the number of homes just doesn't seem like we've been prioritizing that. Public Works has gone up 50% increase. City staff's gone up 20% increase. So these other departments have seen it. But I think the police department has been lacking in getting the growth it needs as the city grows. So that's Matt's take on it. I also want to say that I agree that we need the pavement management fund is going to need help this year. There's no doubt in my mind that that's the case. I would have loved to have the pavement management report done and the fire report done. I think that could have been used as a guiding document. Knowing that this isn't the final number, and that we can always bring it down depending on what those reports say, I would expect to get those reports in time enough time to look at them, read them, digest them, and figure out how that plays into this before we have to make a final decision. But I don't want to cut ourselves short, because if there's a last year, we kind of dropped it at this point in time, and then we lost I'm going to get the term wrong, the social worker for the police officers, and then cut by the county. And the city picked that up this year, and we didn't budget for it. We couldn't raise the budget at the end because we already cut down the maximum. So my biggest concern is things that we don't know that are coming at us. And if we sit here and try to whittle this down to the lowest number possible, and I'm happy to do it, I just worry that something else is going to come up and throw a wrench in all the plans, and we could spend hours debating it just to kind of hurt ourselves, because we don't know what the county is going to do in some situations, as we saw last year, what other things could happen that could affect us. So now I'll stop.
Where do we sit with the social worker?
Currently, we have a social
That's all
worker.
done. That's all done.
Yeah,
She's been hired.
in terms of funding for 2024, does that more of that fall to us, or is that covered?
Yeah, I think it went up. I think I added $2 to $3 grand.
Yeah, I think it was minimal increase, but it's included in the budget. It was included in 23's budget, but we had to use additional revenue dollars to cover it, so that's why. The reason why we had to add it, so we added that $182,000 of one-time money we used to cover some of the offset for the increase in the social worker. which is the one-time dollars that we use. Half of it was spent in 23, and the one-time dollars I'm talking about is the ARPA dollars. It came in from the federal government. It was roughly $365,000, something like that. We agreed last year that we'd bring down the levy, buy it on the levy for 1 year, and say, okay, we're going to buy it on the levy for $182,000, and that is planned again in 2024, is to use the other half of that. So you're going into 2025 already having a $182,000 increase we have to do no matter what, just to keep operations the same. Whether you add all the positions that we're asking for today or not, it doesn't matter. That's another increase that we have to do.
We're using
in
one-time
2025.
income to offset reoccurring costs.
Correct.
It's going to end, and we're going to have to eat that. We're biding our
Correct.
time, but it's
Correct.
not going to bide us the time that the gray codes of the world come in for taxes. So
They're not that far away, though. 26, I think it is.
For what?
Graco, the first building.
First building, I'm going to say 27. It's close,
Yeah.
but 20, I think.
But 25, there's no more money coming in, so it's
No.
going to hit us. We're going to be
7,
short. Like we can't bide our time that long, so we've set ourselves.
We're going to
up
be short
that.
25,
Yep.
no matter what. So that's going to have to hit. Like I said, whether you add these people or not, it doesn't matter who or what you add. That's going to be hit no matter what in 25. So
Do we get that with any, like mid-year hire, things that
Yep.
we don't get to, we've got to compensate for in the following year, and also the budget has been growing every year, so where we're short, what we're really talking about is spending a portion of that new
correct.
revenue on something we can't avoid.
I expect to see some growth still in 25, just so if we're looking out in 25 again, I know we're working on the 24 budget, but if we're looking at 25, I expect still to be there some growth there. I just don't expect it to be as high as it is maybe this year, which is 26%. Last year, if you look back, roughly it was about 34% last year, which I think was an abnormally high number. 26% is this year, and again, the breakdown is 16-10, 16 new, 10 legacy. I think it'll be more somewhere on the lines of 16-ish, and I'm going to guess the breakdown is going to be more like 11% new or 12% new and 4%, 5% legacy. And the reason being is because we're always behind a couple of years when it comes to tax capacity numbers and numbers that you see on your house value. And the county's been having a huge initiative to increase everyone's values based on the current market today. So I think there's a catch-up already that's been done. So most of that increase that we're seeing next year is related to new construction. We still have 150 homes built this year, or somewhere around there, 160. And when I say built, I mean building permits been pulled.
No.
So we still have some growth there. Commercial stuff still has another year left of lag, so there'll still be some of those things. The Inland, the Capital Partners building, the Elrose Steel building that we put up, the Quick Trip, those things are still going to be seen in 25 that weren't seen in 24. So I expect to see some increase. So again, I'm not so concerned about the 182 number in future years, but again, also trying to figure out what the good balance is between 24 and 25 for hires. And again, I mentioned by David is that the half-year hire. So we did have put in and adjust for a half-year hire based on when we actually think people are going to be hired by. So if you hire them halfway through the year, we only budget half of their salary. If you hire them, now we have to pick up the rest of their salary the following year. So that other 69,000 or rough number will have to be picked up in the following year. So again, we can budget for them and not hire them half of the year. That helps us budget to actual numbers, but it doesn't help the tax levy number. That if you're trying to bring that down, that doesn't help that. Yeah, good valid points.
Travis, you want to weigh in?
We've cleaned it up already pretty much, so I mean 14% growth in the city, and then to Matt's point of everything else, like that was the biggest thing that I always hinged on is like, well, what are we missing when we're talking about legacy homes and we're talking about the people that are already here not contributing to the growth, that number, what number are we missing there? So I like the way that you laid it all out. It makes a lot of sense, but I guess if we're just looking for a number, I was kind of landing on the 21.5. Don't know why it was 21.5, but I was like, the cap I feel like the city should have is 21.5, and then we can work within that and Scott's 16 to 18 or wherever we fall in between the end of the year is kind of where I'm at.
So you feel, I just want to make sure I understand. You're looking at 21.5% as the tax levy increase next year, not the requested, and I will say 26% the first time. Now it has been adjusted down, and I think it's like 23.7. And again, that's some adjustments made from activity center position, so on and so forth. So you're roughly about 2% off of where you want to be.
Yeah, with the conversations and flexibility and just the asks and what we can actually work with, I felt comfortable with landing right there. So.
Okay.
It's down to you, Mr. Acting
Well,
Mayor.
I wanted to, I appreciate hearing where everybody's kind of at on some of this. I've got thoughts around it, and the 26% was not going to work for me. I could say that right out of the box. And I do feel like, we should need to increase our spending because of growth and other factors that come into play here. The growth number, as we define it as sort of, new construction related new revenue, that we could, that should be spent related to growth in services caused by that growth. I think that the balance of it. So I would start thinking that 16%. That's fair game, and how we ultimately divide that up would be the answer, not the 26. Since then, I've thought more about it and had more conversation that there are costs that really are should be borne by existing homeowners. The inflation related stuff, just to put it all in a can. We've got wage growth, we've got growth in repairs and maintenance, we've got fuel costs. That's everybody in my view, and there's lots of examples of that. So I think going above the 16% I think is fair, because homeowners are, you can't really call it a benefit, but it's a cost that everybody should share, in my view. What's my number? I don't want to see 20%. I'd like to be under that. That's ultimately what I'm thinking about. But I'm not sure we can get there without cutting some things that I would support. So it's hard for me to kind of do that math in my head. But as it relates to some of the personnel stuff, since that's a big part of our increases this year, I'm disappointed that we don't have the fire study. That's, I'm sure there'll be things that we may not necessarily support in the study, whatever it says, or somebody might write the perfect plan for us. I don't know, but even if it's not the perfect plan, that's going to be our guidebook going forward. And so I'm really reluctant without having that discussion on moving much forward with fire personnel. Now, my caveat to that is that the inspector position, or fire marshal position, that we had written into Gary's job description, that was a big need for us. I felt it's a compliance thing, and it's a safety thing, and it's something we need to be doing. Now, we've learned over the last year that chief job and that job they don't play together. There isn't room for it. Well, we have that gap to fill still, in my view. So the part-time fire inspector would be something that I would support there. But not adding positions beyond that, and I honestly want to see kind of the whole plan. Where are we going over the next 5 years, and what's the best way for us to facilitate that. Police piece, I think that the investigator piece, that's got dropped in our laps, and we got to do what we got to do. While Paul, maybe not your next highest priority, we hear all the time about speeding in our community, and that's world hunger to me, the way people drive where you go. That's not a Dayton problem, but we need to do something with it. I think it's probably one of our most frequent complaints that we get. It certainly is the ones that I hear. And this is something visible that we can do. I think it will have an effect, and so I would support that position as well, as a community benefit, and something that everybody should be in on paying for. It benefits not just the new neighborhoods, but all the current residents as well. I understand the need for, off-shift supervision and stuff, but I'm just concerned that it's a lot of growth for the police department, our size in 1 year, and so I would put those off. And I guess that's where I'm at. I don't. I'm not suggesting at all that they aren't positions we're going to need and we'll need to fill at some point. I just think adding 4 full-time staff in the police department is a lot to manage in 1 year. Marty, your guys are cheap, and so I haven't put a lot of thought into it. They can stay or go. They're not going to sink the boat or float us one way or the other, so I think they're fine if that's what you think you need. So that's kind of my thoughts around it. The other thing that I would say, though, is I think I said this to you, Zach, is that we've had a couple of pretty expensive maintenance events this year. Things that don't necessarily repeat from year to year, and so I don't want us to kind of memorialize that cost in the ongoing budget.
Correct.
I know we've got, we'll get your update later, but we're pretty far off on the I always want to call it the facilities budget. Sorry, your end of town, Marty. That we're pretty far off the mark on that, and probably not gonna be able to recover that to get things back on budget. But some of those things are not things that are going to repeat. So I don't think we should be taking the first 6 months of the year and double it and say there's our starting point for next year and beyond. And that gets what's in those line items that helped you develop your number or anybody else. That's too far in the weeds for what we ought to be doing here.
I concur.
I'm just saying it more broadly that there's a lot of growth in maintenance, and want to make sure we're not planning on another $35,000 fire truck engine or things that generally don't occur on a routine basis.
Sure. Okay.
I have a question, Paul, on the supervisor, the sergeant role. You currently have one sergeant, right?
No.
You don't have any.
I have myself, the lieutenant, and then no sergeants, and then A patrol.
And is your investigator, is he considered a sergeant or not?
Nope, he'll be just an investigator.
Okay. So you're the only supervisor role on this
The
force?
lieutenant is,
Okay.
too. So there's 2 of us. The thing with having night supervisors is eventually we're going to be hiring from a pool of officers that are younger, much younger. We're not going to get to continued where we're bringing these guys over from other departments, because robbing Peter to pay Paul is going to come to an end one of these days. Luckily, we've been fortunate enough that people are wanting to come to our department, so that's been kind of nice. But eventually, your Eden Prairie's, Minnetonka's, Brooklyn Parks are raising their salaries so much for a patrol officer, you're not going to be able to rob them from them. So currently we have a guy working night shift. When he's the only car on, he has a 1.5 year experience. He has no supervision with him or available to him on the spot. If he has to kick in a door, gets in a pursuit, make quick decisions, where supervisors should be consulted with. So unfortunately, that's the part of the supervision at night that we can't provide them. We're not there. Yeah, we can pick up our phone, but it's might be 5-10 minutes
or whatever it
to make that decision in a life-death situation. Or you get in a pursuit, policy says you got to notify a supervisor. Well, it takes us time to get out of bed, turn our radios on, monitor the speeds, the location, all that. So having that supervision at night allows these guys to bounce ideas off of them quickly and without hesitation.
And the supervisor's not just sitting in an office on it.
No,
he's going to be patrol or whatever. I mean, you're
someone's going to watch us and ask the question, so I'm asking the question so we don't get the question. That's all I'm getting doing that.
I mean, if you have that guy, he's going to be out.
Yeah.
He's going to be one of the 2 guys on at night.
Yeah. I mean, Scott, you lived here long enough. At one point in time we had 0 cops on at night, right? I mean, I lived here long enough. I remember those days.
Yeah.
I think there's a potential for us right now to have 0 officers on at night, because if that officer has to arrest somebody, they have to then drive that person down to Minneapolis. So if we arrest somebody at night, there are times there are no officers on in the city of Dayton. Like physically in the city of Dayton. They're on, they're just in Minneapolis, the other end of the county. So again, that's my concern around, and I've talked to you about this. I look at the goal I want to achieve, and then what kind of benchmarks fall into there to get that. And to me, having, in Matt's opinion, having 2 officers on at night is a better option, knowing how the actual transaction happens if someone's arrested. It's good for the officer safety because we have a newer person on who I've met, great guy. Also, it's good for the citizens so that we have the extra piece on. We saw, I don't know if you guys posted or the neighborhood posted about people driving around checking cars in the driveway, right, at night. That stuff happens, and we're a little sleepy community, so I think people just think it's not going to be an issue if they do it out here, which I think is wrong, but is the case. And it also, I think it's just better for everyone the whole way around. But that's, again,
I don't disagree.
I don't think you disagree.
No,
I
no.
just prioritize that over a band shell or a splash pad. To me, that's more important.
Well, that kind of the band
That's
shit,
my
that
opinion.
comes out of parks anyway. So it can come out of budget.
And I can tell you right now with the market that it is, if I try to go for 4 cops all at once, I will never do it. It will take me, to get the first 2 positions on board, it will probably take me till July. So for to get 2 trained fully officers, it would take me probably till July. And then I would do my next 2 hires and promotions in July, is the way I'd look at it, because it's going to take me, I can't say give me 4 at the beginning of the year, because I know.
You just did.
You don't have the resources.
Yeah, but in all reality, I won't have all
Right.
4 of them trained
Well, one time.
or hired,
Yeah.
because I may find 2 guys that I can pull out of different agencies, but then I might have to go out to applications for the other 2.
For the other 2.
That I might be getting young cops that take 6-7 months to even train.
That's your traffic guy, though. That's your starter
So-
guy is your traffic guy right off the bat, no?
No, I have to do promotions by seniority.
Oh, really?
Yep.
You
So
mean a traffic guy is a promotion?
Yep. It's a
Or night shift.
event.
Or night shift.
Yep.
Yeah,
it's a rotate.
I wouldn't
Yeah,
guarantee
rotate.
anything on that. You need you're void at the night shift, so that's where you got to.
The
where the guys
promotion of the
go.
traffic cars, you're only doing traffic stops. That's
Yeah.
your main goal. Again, you'd probably be backup for anything else, but again, it's going to be, they're not doing patrols, they're not doing house checks and all that stuff. They're just doing traffic stops. That's a
And
promotion
the
for people that
invest.
don't have to deal with it.
How did we word that? The
I got it
investigator role.
wrong.
Investigator role. Can you share that with somebody else? Because we don't. Do we really have? Dayton's. There's not much crime here.
You'd be
You got to remember an investigation like the magnitude that's going on with all these thefts in the area. That's a multi-day investigation, multi-month, to get it from where you catch these guys or try to find these guys to the point of charging them, to the point of going to court with them. It's more than what you think. It's a lot more activity.
Yeah, clearly.
It's not 1 hour like NCIS.
It's not pencil whipping paper.
Oh no, I wouldn't
I know
think
you
one
don't.
hour.
And then you got multi-jurisdictional ones like Paul's mentioned. So maybe those people are car checking cars in Maple Grove, Plymouth, Minneapolis,
Making
wherever.
rounds, yeah.
You got to work with all the other jurisdictions on that same
Child
thing.
protection cases,
Yes.
adult protection cases are through the roof. They have to do all of them.
I want to try to
Does
understand.
it-
Yeah, go ahead.
What does it look like then if we,
We haven't even ran the 18% numbers yet, have we? What do we get if we have that number?
What do you mean?
what do we don't get?
Or what do we don't get?
Well, that's the problem. Is we'd have to figure out what we don't get, because right now, the only
Yeah.
thing that's being requested at this time is operational changes. That's it. So I'm gonna tell you right now, pavement management's out for sure. Because if we're only looking at operational changes this time, and we're only going to say okay, 18% or 20% or something, we're cutting something out of operations. Now, the stuff that I've already cut is easy because it's just those budgeted dollars. There's change in timings of when we're hiring people. There's adjustments from who we had in the budget, so on and so forth. Those are easy changes. The ones from now on to get from 23 point. I'll pull the number up here.
Correct me if I'm wrong, though. What Paul just told us just now is that 731 number. That's for 4 full time starting today.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay.
So now all of a sudden he just chopped half of that, or a quarter of that in half.
The issue with
More than that,
cutting
actually.
in half and
No, not half.
He cut half of it in half, and he cut the other half down
It's
to
20
months.
it's 25%.
So here's the problem with if we do that scenario. If we do
Then it
exactly
hurts
with
us
what
next
he's gonna, when he's gonna actually hire, you're just kicking the can on the road for the next year's levy. So my concern is
That's
that
okay. You're not
it is.
necessarily.
It is because then we have
to increase.
the budget next
Exactly.
year.
But we.
No, you're
but
gonna
if
have
we
more.
hire them all-
You got more money coming in too.
If we hire them all today, well, January 1, we hire everybody. We have all those people going into the next budget.
Yep.
We're going to have
Yep.
that cost
You're still
every
gonna have
year.
it every
so
year.
if we don't hire them to maybe one in second quarter and one in third quarter, or
Yep.
third quarter and fourth quarter, we do get that savings for that percentage of the year
You
this
save 'em.
year,
Yep.
and we were going to be paying that new amount next year anyway.
Yep.
No. So if you budget them, so the timing of the actual expense and the budget are related, but they're separate. So the timing of if we don't budget for them and we budget them based on when we can actually hire them, then we kick the can on the road. And I mean that this for the same example of half a year at a cop, for $69,000, we could push them and say we're going to hire them as of July 1.
July 1.
Yep. But that means that the following year in 25, we have to increase the budget by another $69,000 because we only have 69 grand budgeted for this year to pay for them. The tax levy number is just a back end number, and everyone thinks that's the number we put in front. That's the last number we look at. It's what are the expenditures, what are the offsets of revenues, and the difference comes out of tax levy because we're budgeting next year to not raise or gain or lose any money
On the levy, yeah.
on the levy. So the levy is just a back end number. If we say, okay, you're not going to hire a cop till halfway through the year, which very well might be true, and I'm not saying that it's not. I'm just saying that if you say $69,000 we're going to save on this year's levy, great. So we cut it another 69 grand, we save ourselves another percent. Well, that means that next year you're going to have an automatic percentage increase, and what I don't know is I'm projecting that it's going to be a 16% tax capacity. It might come in at 5, and then we're going to go. Well, now we have to have $69,000 per officer if we're hiring them halfway through the year, and then we have $182,000 that we have to do for one-time revenue. So we can't just say, okay, it's easy peasy. He cut, $150,000 because we have to add that unless we're just going to hire them on for 6 months and cut them, which.
No, you're not
I
going to do that.
heard the mayor last time that if anybody has to do an operational cut next year, it's going to be your head, and because it's not fair for Paul to say, okay, next year you have an automatic increase. That just leaves everyone else in the room. That leaves Marty's, Amy's, myself, Jason Engineering, Gary, everybody at a loss because we have to have that increase next year no matter what, and that cuts out pavement management increases you want, park dedication dollars you want to put in there for new pavilions and new structure.
Amenities, yep.
The levy dollars are just how many dollars we bring in the door for operations, and we have to be able to fund them in the future.
You're
So-
guaranteeing that operations are going to increase from
No matter what.
24 to 25.
Yeah.
So is the revenue.
If
Not
Guaranteed.
always.
100% guaranteed.
But again,
it's going to.
Okay, but
Look what the county does.
here's the counter argument I make to that.
Sure.
If new revenue coming in is supposed to go towards growth, right? Now we're using new revenue to come in for pay for last year's growth, versus using new revenue to pay for next year's growth. You're constantly stealing from Peter to pay Paul. Like you're playing a year ahead, and so you're never getting to a point where you're ahead. You're always like behind in your budgeting process. That's just how
I can say that same token. If you budget for 4 cops now and don't hire 2 of them until August, you're budgeting for 4 cops
to have a
that you're not using. You're having a surplus for
Correct.
2024
It will affect
that you're not using.
It will affect 24. We'll have a surplus, but in 25, it won't make it so,
So
the
in
city's
25
expenditures go up any.
Deal with 25 and 25. That's my opinion. I mean,
And that's what he means by kicking it on the road. We'll
Yes.
just deal with it next year.
Yeah, so
That's
if you
the-
deal with it next year, which again, we can do that.
can
I'm just
do
telling
that.
you, it's not going to be great for anybody in this room, including myself, when I say, okay, next year we have to have a $350,000 increase in the tax levy, and I don't know what the county's going to do with valuations or new construction or what's going to be on the books. Again, I'm projecting, and I think my projections are pretty good. I'm probably 80% pretty confident that it's going to be right, but there's a 20% chance that it's not right. And we could come in here and say, okay, we have a $300,000 increase, which is 5%, and we only had a 4% increase last year and next year in tax capacity. What positions are we cutting, or are you raising the tax rate? And nobody wants to raise the tax rate, including any staff, and that's why it's important for us to keep the tax rate at status quo. And so trying to also plan for next year to say we want more pavement management dollars, which we don't disagree. I don't think anybody in this room disagrees we're going to need. And also park needs that are going to ever increase as we get more people in here. People want more amenities, they want more time, they want more programming, they want more things happening. That's just natural of the progression of a city. That just happens. And we want to be able to say, we want to take all that new growth and be able to put it to those fun things that the community's going to see versus having to do
not all,
with.
but a piece.
Yeah, but to see versus covering operations from last year that we said, oh, we'll just kick the can down the road and not pay for it in the year.
I'll add one more piece to this, and I asked Zach this question because I think it's important. Assuming we don't change, I'm going to get the word right, the tax rate this year, we leave it exactly where it is, people will pay more in taxes because their houses will go up. I don't disagree with that one bit. That's just how it works. If houses go up 10% next year, the average home will pay an extra $170 a year or $13 a month. I mean, I don't think that's, to me, $13 a month is something, it seems manageable knowing that what we're going to be getting for that. And I'm not saying where we have assigned the dollars is where I think they belong.
Yeah.
I'll use the EDA for example. I don't think we need to put any more money in the EDA until they spend the money they have.
I don't disagree.
So, but that's in this number. And I know you agree with me, which is why I'm using that example. And so, like, I'm not saying the numbers are, like, in the column I would put, the other row I'd put them in. But I think it's a fair starting point for what we're looking at. I know not everyone agrees with me on that, and that's okay. I just, as I look at kind of how much more I'm going to be paying versus what I'm going to get, I'm okay with that. But that's my opinion.
So I'm just going to, I found this. I was going through old emails today, and I forgot I put this together. But so we figure with what we put together last year is we figured with all the new houses that have came in since the census, we're at about 10,436 people. That's using a 2.9 per capita. Currently, our officer to population ratio is 0.96 per 1,000.
Right.
Minnesota officer population ratio is 1.65 per 1,000 per the BCA in 2021. So and on average, Rogers is at 1.7, Corcoran is at 1.9, Medina's at 1.6, Minnetrista's at 1.3.
What would the 4 more put us at?
What would 2 or 4 more
Or 2 more or 4 more
do
put us
with
at?
our numbers than that?
Would probably put us right at the 1.6, I would assume.
2 or 4.
4.
Yeah.
So I'm not, when people say it's a want, it's a need because we're below officer to population.
I'm not saying it's not a need. I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is that, in my opinion, the program he outlined, you don't need 150 of the 730 that he's asking for 2024. You don't need it until 2025.
Don't disagree. Yep, I'm not disagreeing with
So
your
you're
aspect
taxing
of timing.
today for what you want tomorrow. Or what you need.
However, you could look at it one of two ways. Either you could say planning for the future, and then we're saying that we're going to budget for it all this year with the growth that we're seeing, and then not having to do a $150,000 increase, as in guaranteed increase we have to go next year. Or you can look at it the way you're looking at it, which is don't do the 150 this year, cut it, and actually go based on when you're actually going to get the people in there. And next year you're going to have a $150,000 increase no matter what, and we'll deal with it then.
This budget is going to be, in 2025, this Dayton's budget is going to be in the $9 million area.
I mean,
I'm
if
guessing,
you have your $150,000 plus the $180,000 we have to have no matter what. I'm just using the
150 grand is nothing.
150, 180. That's 330,000. Plus, you're going to have an increase for pavement management. Something.
We need that now.
And an increase in wages.
And an increase in wages.
An increase in fuel.
And, yeah.
An
So we're
increase in
gonna.
insurance.
My guess is you're going to be sure. You could be $9 million.
Yeah.
You could be less than that too. I don't know.
We're going to be sitting here having the same conversation again next year about,
absolutely.
we're spending way too much, even though we know that we set ourselves up to spend this money next year. That's, I guess, where I just want to make sure if that's what we're going to do, that we all accept the fact that current citizens, not the ones that move in the next year, current citizens are going to have an increase to bear because the decisions we're making today, if that's the model we're going to go with. I can get behind that. I'm not disagreeing with you one bit, but I want to make sure everyone nods and agrees that, yes, I know what we're setting ourselves up for, because then when we have this conversation here and we roll back the film and we say, okay, we know we got to do this, right? Like, that's given. This is already built into some kind of increase somewhere, and we can't just pull from the new growth all the time because the new growth is going to require more new stuff because we have new growth. Like, we have to agree that that's what we're setting ourselves up for.
So
That's
somehow now, and I don't think anybody in this room disagrees, somehow pavement management is underfunded.
You can take $100,000 from the EDA and put it there, as far as I'm concerned. That's a start. That's not all of it, but that's a start.
Yeah. And maybe it's, I said 400. I mean, you can get 2 officers with all of that for sure. Maybe that number is 500 and you get 2.5 or something, whatever the number is. Somewhere along the line, that 400 to me has got to go into pavement management first.
So you're prioritizing pavement management over personnel or police, fire, or whatever.
To an extent. I mean, I'm not saying you got to cut all 4 of them off.
No, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying, like, you're prioritizing pavement management over the
Yeah.
operations of the police.
You're
or fire
spending
department.
everything in pavement management next year. There's not $1 left after next year.
There will be, there's some money left over. The plan is never to spend it all. But because you never know, I will tell you, in any one of the capital funds, the idea is never to spend it all because you never know what's going to come in and all of a sudden it's going to break.
Shit happens.
You have no clue. And so the idea is never to spend it all because guaranteed something happens where it's like, oh, that didn't last as long as we thought, or oh, that's going to break. So it's guaranteed to happen. So, okay. You made a play around scenarios. I'm happy to do that in the Excel file. Do you want to hear from Gary? I know he's on the phone and listening. I know his biggest priority, like I said, is getting that additional position. I know his current operations are basically him running. He did provide me a graph, and I'm happy to send that out to the council after the meeting, so you have that with the time that he spent over the last year and a half or year and some change that he's been here, of what he's been doing over that last year, and broken out his time for what he's been happening. And I will say it's very small amount is being code enforcement. Most of it is training, facilities management, and apparatus management, and trying to get SOPs, SOGs assigned, and doing this fire study. And we spent most of the first few months of his tenure here battling personnel issues that took up, I will say, a significant amount of both myself and his time. And so that's been a challenge for him, and then getting all the operation stuff done. I know that as much as it's out of sight, out of mind, there was lots of things that were skipped in the fire department over many, many years. And I'm sure you could talk to all of the firefighters that sit here today as about what is happening now versus what is happening 4 years ago or 3 years ago, or I guess most of our department's really, really young, so they might not even have 3 years in. But we are needing operations just because I'm asking Gary to do things. For example, we have a fire hydrant program that we're trying to get started at that we'd love to have people adopt a fire hydrant. Hasn't even got off the ground yet because we're still working on other things. We need to have an emergency management plan, which I don't disagree. It's a planning thing that I know you're not thrilled about, Scott, but what happens if there's a bomb in the building here and it blows the building up?
We die.
Yeah. I'm not trying to die. I'm saying if I'm not here. If I'm here, then I'm dead. I don't care.
But Zach's never going to be involved in these.
Yeah,
The
well,
question isn't what you do with the dead. That's
correct.
the easy one.
Yeah.
It's what you do with the people who survive.
Yeah, correct.
Dig a hole.
What happens with
Okay.
what happens if
Where do you move the operation?
where do we move the operations? You also have the fact that
Well, you guys can do that plan without having
It's
2 or
more
3 more
than
people.
that.
to do
You,
it.
It's more than that.
we have
Trust
lots
me.
there's lots of training things that are needed. This department is very, very young, so spending lots of time on trainings. We have there's a lot operational wise that I will say that you didn't see get done before because it didn't get done, and then again, knock on wood, we never had a catastrophe in this town. I will tell you that a lot of small towns across Minnesota could probably say the same thing.
What % of our operations are documented in SOP?
We have officially 3, I believe.
Yeah. The fire department's been around forever. That's all they documented is
we
3
have 3
procedures?
documented procedures of how to operate things. All the rest have either been verbally communicated or somehow done through trainings where you know it,
Yeah.
but it's not, if you ever have to reference something to say, and this happens at City Hall all the time, how do you do this process? I don't know, write up the process because we don't have one. I mean, it's just been word of mouth or just do it and then get it done. And we've been documenting things with City Hall, but I can guarantee with Fire Department that as much as I'd love to say it's happening, it probably is when he gets a chance. But he's also got fire calls he's responding to, and he's also responding to trainings, and he's trying to keep his chief's license up, which means he's got to go to conferences and trainings. And you saw he went to a couple of them, and he's been that's but he needs that to keep his chiefs up and keeps his trainings up so that he can provide that back to the department. So there's lots of operations things that are needed in the fire department that I will tell you probably weren't even thought about, and I didn't even know about when I. Go ahead, Gary. I don't know. We can barely hear you, but go ahead.
Okay. If you guys can hear me, the biggest thing is, as Zach said, is there is a lot of operational issues. I'm spending 70 to 75% of my time dealing with operations, and the problem with that is the city and the fire department are incurring a considerable amount of liability. I can only do so much. Things get missed, and it's hard to describe on the phone, but I'll give you one example recently, and it was on me. But we had maintenance done, our trucks trying to run forth or get EAM back in 2 stations. They over at station 1 off the tanker because they were going to lost them in Old Town, and obviously you don't want them to do that. And so the tanker ended up being left half empty instead of being full, and that was on me. And I gave that same example the other night at training, just because there's so many things that I'm trying to accomplish throughout the day. Zach can send you out what I put together as relates to the majority of his operation. 5% of my time is trying to get standard operating procedures put together. As Zach said, there are none for the fire department. You go back and you look at stuff, council never approved anything. They're just basically word of mouth. I'm trying to get the safety ones first. The other things that the city as a whole is the liability of is health and safety officers from the whole city. Things we've done from an AWARE program. Councilman Prashant, some of this from his time at Fairview, but we don't have a citywide program for that, which needs to be taken care of as well. So what?
I can't
Is that
understand.
currently done?
Hey, Gary. You're breaking up pretty badly. As much as I'd like to say we can hear you, I can kind of understand every couple words. I don't know if maybe you can just summarize something in an email about. That'd be great. Do you send it over to me or something?
The one thing I'll say to everything that Gary, and I don't.
Thank you, Gary. Sorry, not to cut you off.
I don't begrudge him at all for wanting the best fire department there is. I don't begrudge that at all.
Yep.
We have made huge strides in the last year and a half, because when he did his presentation here 3 months ago, when he started, there was like 1.5 firefighters per call.
Yep.
And now there's 5.3. That's a vast improvement. So be happy with that. And you can't have the coup de la right off the bat. We can't. I mean, Dayton can't have it. So it's not wrong to strive for it, but it's not in the numbers. And from what I hear, the people are not saying, "Hey, give me the coup." They're just not. I mean,
I don't think that's what he's looking for. I think what he's looking for is to take care of the regulatory matters that would definitely put us in a bind if we were to get copied by OSHA and audited by OSHA, the state, or any of those other entities, NFPA, that come through and say like, hey, I need training records for such and such individual, or you're out of compliance. Like, there's heavy fines that come with that kind of stuff. So like the MinAware program stuff, like, we're supposed to have accident reduction program. We don't have that. We're supposed to, near misses and incidents and stuff like that.
and why is it that we don't have it? Dayton's had a fire department for how many years?
Nobody ever put it in place.
Nobody put anything in place. It was,
And it worked 5 years ago. I mean, we're making progress, but I mean, it's not perfect.
We got lucky for a very long
Yeah.
time, is what it is. But now you got more people, more risk. We operate in a like a high risk, low frequency category where we have a lot that said that could happen, that we're lucky that doesn't.
Yeah.
I'd like to see more of that come down to that we operate in the low risk, low frequency area where we don't have, or low risk, low high frequency where we're hitting more of these calls and we're doing more of these things on a more frequent basis that doesn't leave us gaps that says, hey, this could have been avoided if we had just done, this training or had this inspection done or stuff like that. That's the gaps I feel like Gary, when he tries to explain it to us, he's trying to close. Same thing with Paul. There's gaps he's trying to identify that say like there's high risk here. We should emphasize putting more officers on the street because then it alleviates having personnel issues or department issues. I mean, I could say the same thing for every department in the city. It's just when we start to grow to this size and we start to have these higher risk, higher whatever type calls that come through just on emergency management front, we have to be better prepared. And just saying like, hey, we're doing better than we did 5 years ago, I still say we're still 20 years behind, so we still have that gap to close. Like, hey, we're making progress, don't get me wrong, but like we're still not there yet. And I like to put more emphasis on like trying to close those gaps and trying to make sure that, when we have staff and personnel that are responding to calls, like they have the adequacies to do their job and go home.
And I'll just get into the emergency management portion of it. We've always lacked the emergency management portion of anything in our city. I mean, yeah, we're great at flood fighting because we've done it.
Mm-hmm.
But a tornado comes through here. Yeah, we have an adopted plan that's put on by the Northwest Emergency Management Group, but we don't have a specific plan in the city. This is going to be who does this, this, and this, and this.
Yep.
So we have to make our own amendments.
Amendments. Yep.
Yeah, I can't talk tonight.
You're good.
To that master plan, and it hasn't been done. Just like we haven't been able to do a training for City Hall, Public Works,
Mm-hmm.
Police, Fire, City Council should all be trained with some sort of emergency management, because when it ultimately hits the fan, a big tornado comes through here, we're going to be running around like our heads cut off. I was in the St. Peter tornadoes as a cop, and they ran off with their head cut off because it was such a big disaster, but they were able within a couple days to get it straightened out. They did a phenomenal job. But that's where we're lacking, that we've never had enough personnel to where one of us can say, okay, we're going to sit down and we're just going to work on this, because you get called to a conference call, or the riots happen, or something else happens. So we need the assistance to be able to accomplish other parts of our job that is a major thing in the city. And I think that's how Gary would sum it up too.
Correct, yeah, and that's our biggest ask. So I'm trying to figure out is that if the council is, and this is where I'm trying to go here, is where do we set the preliminary levy at? And I'm not saying that the conversations are final by any means of any conversations that we have to have. I need to come up with a ceiling that you're okay with. If it's 26%, then it's 26%. And I'm not saying the dollars are set in a certain spot and anywhere. But if we set a 26% levy increase, or let's say we use an 18% levy increase, and then we get the payment management study back, and it's like, you need 500 more grand. Is that going to be the first thing that's put into place, and then we're cutting operations back down to 13%? I'm telling you right now, that's going to be mostly just keeping status quo, and we might get one officer out of that, maybe. And so that's just my biggest concern is understanding.
Which number?
So I'm using your 18% or 20% number or whatever. If you say, okay, we're going to set the levy limit at 20%, that's the number. I'm just going to use that as an artificial number. Say the levy limit is going to be 20%. And it doesn't matter where it goes. It can go any one of the categories that are up there or listed. It doesn't matter. And in the end of September or early October, we get the payment management study done, and we get that back, and we also get the fire study back. And it says both of these things, that we need to have an assistant chief, we need to have land picked out for the fire station, we need to have $500,000 more of pavement dollars, and these are studies that come back from the professionals to say this is what you need. Are those then the priority? And then we're cutting back operations to make it work? So then what's happening is that we're taking the 20% and we're crunching it down to say, okay, now you only get 10% because the other 10% goes to the pavement management needs, the fire needs, and whatever else. So then 10% gets needed. Well, then remember we already have increased costs from things that we're already having to do, no matter what, whether that's status quo or not. That's repair and maintenance. That's motor fuels. That's increases based on unit contracts. That's supplies increases.
Inflation
That's payroll.
cost.
That whatever cost it is. Now we take your 10%. Okay, now you're down to 2%, and now you're trying to add a traffic car, an investigator, and then
Inspector, whatever,
inspector,
I mean,
it's
personnel,
2
yeah.
sergeants, and there's just no way it's going to be possible. Like, or you take the crunch down and just go, and that's just no way. And I'm fine with whatever number the council's good with, but I'm telling you, I would strongly urge you to leave the number high with all of these unknowns here to be able to bring it down. And again, I'm not saying that if you set the number at 26%, I'm not saying that's going to be the final levy number. By any means am I saying that, because I think there needs to be more conversation, more information needed, and more space for the unknown. Because I don't think, again, I'll repeat myself again, I don't think anybody's saying we don't need pavement management. I'm not saying anybody doesn't think we don't need the fire study back, because that's a big thing that's been hinging on this. I'm not saying we don't need anything else, parks, any other priorities that we have. I just want to make sure that we all know that whatever levy limit we set, again, the bucket doesn't matter where it's at. We can move the $100,000 of EDA up to pavement management. That doesn't affect the levy. That just leaves it the same. That just reallocates the $100,000. Now we have $100,000 more in pavement management. I'm just trying to make sure that we understand that what are we okay with going on people's tax statements that people aren't going to lose their mind over. If we use Matt's number, like I said, I provided him, which was the tax rate stays the same and your house goes up 10%. Whether that 10% is related to the fact you added a deck, added a basement, or or just the fact that your neighbor's house sold for $500,000 more than what you bought yours for. Mm-hmm. That 10% is taken into consideration. That's about 170. I think that's what a number I gave you.
170 a year, $13.50 a month.
So $170 a year, people aren't going to lose their mind over. And I will tell you that anybody looks at their tax statement, at least most people that I talk to, they look at it and go, okay, what did I pay last year? What am I going to pay this year? Mm-hmm. And if they see a decrease, I will say that most of them don't ever say anything because they never will.
Well, here's the other piece
if
that
they're
not going to see a decrease because the county's going to charge more and the school district's going to charge more, and so all they're going to know is the total taxes went up. Even though, and we see it all the time, and I heard it constantly when walking around. The city taxes went down last year, and yet still people say my taxes go up, my taxes go up, and sometimes they do. But a lot of the times it's the other two entities.
Most of the time, people will look line by line and go, how much did this county go up? How much did the city go up, and how much did the school district go up? And not always. Sometimes they always default back to the city. Some residents do. Some residents go by whoever's the highest increase, and they'll complain to them. Because that's typically how it goes. And $170, I don't know what the county's doing. I have no clue. And so I'm trying to figure out what the council's okay with putting on the number for the tax statement that you aren't going to, again, knowing that the number is not final, and I'm not saying 26% is the final number, or 23%, or 21, or whatever. I would just hate to go into the final thing and going, well, now we need this, and now we don't have the money for it. And that's my biggest concern, is cutting our foot off before we even know we have something else that we need on our foot. So, a shoe or a sandal. And I'm happy to run any scenarios, like I said, of the numbers and where they allocate to and whatever else. I have no problem running those numbers or sitting down with any one of the council members and going through those things too. But
I would like to see the budget.
No more than 20.
But, right. And I'm still there because I don't know what you get for that.
Right.
Or what we don't get for that.
Correct me if I'm wrong here. We're dealing with 1.7, right? That's our rough guess.
Well, yeah, now pretty it's down to 1.5. Yeah, 1.7 is basically.
It's roughly.
Yep.
New
Keep
money
the tax rate the same.
Yeah. Okay.
Tax rate the same.
So here's some numbers, and it gets pretty close. $300K are costs. That's the cost that you guys outlined. That's everything's going up. 143 of that, 100 plus 143 in wage increases.
It's more than that, but yeah. The total combined between the two, when I added it up, was 600 and some. I can do it again.
You added wrong.
Well, then Excel added wrong. I put the numbers in the spreadsheet and then highlighted them.
Well, the wage thing is 143,000.
That's just for the finance department. The wage increases for the police was 130.
That's just Zach's.
That's just my salary.
The wage increases for the fire department was 8,500. The wage increases for Marty's team is 75,000. So there's a lot more.
That's all included in it. That's part of the 300 though.
300 is probably repair and maintenance, motor fuel,
Yeah,
supplies,
that too, yeah.
contract
No,
services,
yeah, that's the rest of it.
assessing
Yep.
services, law, legal. I mean, there's all those line items are probably 300K, and then the rest is wages, which is 600. I'm going to use 650 or
The
something.
total of golf is about 600.
Okay,
Wages
that's-
and inflation.
Wages can't be no
Not-
$350,000.
not the-
Well, if just
There's one that finance.
Total
guy-
salary.
that's
That's the
143, and then
With,
the
But that
wage
salary was already in there too.
But-
I mean, we
No.
were already paying that salary.
But the wage increases for the police alone is 130. So now you're up to what?
That includes
270.
no new people. I'm just letting you know.
Yep.
Right.
That's
Yep.
strictly
That's
just union
270.
contracts that are agreed upon, and
Fire
How
department's
many
under 10.
cops you
That's
got?
280.
8?
8 patrol, lieutenant, myself, a CSO, and then 2 admin
2,000.
assistants.
yeah, so it's
So you're
13,000.
with the police or the fire at 280, and then you add in public works, and you're at 300, and that's 75 more. So you're at
Okay, well-
355 just in wage increases, if nothing else changes.
So that's going to say there's nothing left. 300 in cost, 143. I've got 1.5, and that's putting 400 in pavement. An extra 400 in pavement.
Something's wrong with you, man.
No, the numbers add up. I'm just missing something.
Well, can you put that together?
put together.
I mean,
I think what we really
Scott's
yeah.
elements he's defined or
Yeah.
got his costs there. You know, validate.
I mean, I've got
validate those, I
540,
guess,
540 in
essentially.
cost.
Sure.
You got 650.
That includes the wages, though.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I'm 100 off.
Yep.
Somewhere in there,
I'm 100 off of your
yeah. Sure.
cost.
Yeah.
So basically, this is 1.6. That's spending the whole 1.7.
Sure.
But they're only asking
But-
for
But that's
1.5
all.
now.
But that's also putting 400 in pavement. And
But you're
gonna
cutting.
lose an
How many
officer
new
and a
people are
half
you
out of
adding
that
though?
deal.
Yeah. How many new people are you adding, though?
His two and a half police officers.
Half the officers. That's where you get your
Half
money
the
for
officers.
pavement. Is half the
Half the
officers.
officers. No fire
No
department.
fire department
Oh,
increase.
no.
Okay.
I can't support that.
Yep,
I mean, I just
yep.
can't.
That, like I said, I want to figure out. I don't think you're far off with
Yeah.
with your numbers there, just based on quick math, because you're taking away, you know,
EDA is 100.
3 people,
Yeah.
and that 3 people is probably the other 400,000 or
Right.
something like that that you're seeing for pavement management that you're putting in.
Yeah, the 2 officers alone are 300, and then you
Yep.
take out the
And the-
fire is a 170.
And then
so there's
maybe
your
all of
money.
a sudden, 8 months from now, you don't need the whole 400 in pavement. So maybe that's where a little piece comes back. I don't know.
Yeah, so if we did that, we'd have to make a transfer, which is it's one time, whatever.
It's
Okay.
possible.
Yep, it's possible to do that. It's just the problem is then you're moving dollars for operations or capital equipment dollars
Yep.
into operations, and I don't know if I love being not transparent with where the money's going to when we're saying it's going to go towards payment management, and then we move $200,000 over to operations for the general fund. Not saying that that's not we can't do that. It's just being transparent with if a citizen asks me where we put the money at. Okay, we put the money here, but then they're not going to ask about a transfer. They just don't. Not saying that you're wrong. It's
For me,
Right,
history.
but
for
wouldn't
from,
that happen before the final budget in December? Those changes, so they
what
could
he,
be
what Scott is saying is
both-
if we put those numbers that he uses right there and put those in next year, and then halfway through the year we realize we don't need $200,000. Now we have
You're
to
gonna do a
transfer from one to the other, and now we're not
during
during the fiscal year. And again, I'm not saying that that's not possible because it is. It's just not as transparent of saying, okay, we're going to put $1 million into payment management, which I think we all can probably agree that that would be the number. I don't know. Jason might be the closest one that would have a clue what the number is going to be. And then we say, oh, 200
How
grand
far
for
are we from
operations.
having that?
So to be honest, I would not plan on having that tool in place for informing this budget.
As at
Really?
the end of the year?
Well, the tool will be built and brought back in September.
why did we even do it then?
For next year.
For next year. I mean, for what
So we can
it's
increase more next
so
year,
it comes
Scott.
back in September, and then we will be working with Marty and finance and the groups on what treatments do you want to consider. And then we have to set expectations. What do you want your system to look like overall? And then this tool can be utilized to establish budgets. And you can do a top-down or a bottom-up budget.
So when
You
we
can
say-
I want my system to be this good over time, and we'll say it'll cost this much money per year, or you can say, here's how much money we have, and we'll say, here's how it's best spent.
My
So
question,
it's a
is when it says this budget season, are you talking about for the preliminary one or for the final one in December?
He's talking about
The
2020, this
preliminary
budget.
report will
Okay.
come back in September.
Yep.
But then we'll have to build all the tools, set the parameters, define the expectations.
When will that be
and
done?
Final report
So
is
you're thinking
scheduled
for
for
25
mid-November.
budget is when it-
Okay, so mid-November. So we will have some time before the final levy again if we don't cut everything
It's
to.
gonna be like that notice today about 1 o'clock.
I sure hope not. I'll be honest, I didn't love that either, but we can again table it and talk about it next meeting too if we really want to.
Okay.
Well, we got like.
You got like 5 minutes. Yep. So I'm trying to figure out where the council's at with, again, not trying to cut ourselves short, but also understanding that there is not just an unlimited spending book as we may have used in the past, or there's a money trail back where we can just grab cash off, because that's not the case either.
There's no slush fund.
There is no slush fund. There is no
That's
contingency
what I'm trying
dollars.
to build.
If you look
It's
at
taxed differently.
if you look at
So
yeah,
increasing spending this year to
Correct.
plan for
We
next
gotta,
year.
we gotta pay attention to spending,
Yeah.
that's the issue. I mean, the history is if it's in here, it's gone. And then we gotta get away from that. If I say, go ahead and spend the whole 1.7, nothing.
Well, you already know where it's gonna
Nothing
go.
against you guys, but you're spending it.
the idea is to
Well, in
increase.
fairness, it'll be
increase
1.5,
Yep.
and a lot of that won't get spent right away. So we are building a slush fund that way via the way the chief wants to buy.
Correct. Yeah. So, like,
Anyway.
if this was again, it's on my budget, but if it was me, I would move the 100,000 out of the EDA and put it towards pavement management because I think it's more necessary out of there. That would put 700,000 towards pavement management. You can put your extra slush of 175 into pavement management and do the whole 1.7 million. I don't love that fact either, but again, I'm trying to figure out how not to cut our foot off. And if we want to cut spending and say, or when I say cut spending, I mean cut the asks down, which is fine. We're going to have to do it and figure out what's going to be the number that the council is comfortable with in December. And not saying that, again, the final number is set in September, because it's not. It's what the comfortability of the council is of saying, this could be the number, but it also could be way less. And on almost every budget I've worked on, that we haven't cut it down to the nickel on in September, it's come down historically for myself, whether that's with Dayton or with any other community that I've worked with. I've always been able to say, okay, we're going to leave it high to bring it down. And it's not the ultimate goal to do that, but it just ends up happening because there's new changes. I'll get insurance numbers back in October. They could go up, down, or indifferent. I don't know. I'm putting on projections, and that's where we're at. So I would appreciate if the council would be able to send me something. I'll talk to Dennis this week when he gets back about where you're comfortable with the things right there. Great, fantastic. Send me something like that so I could kind of game plan, and then I could put something together again for September 12th, I believe is the date. Well, we will plan on not having a work session. We'll have the meeting. We can have discussion at the meeting to adjust things around and amend things. We can amend things all you want on the 12th as long as we come up with a number that we're good with at the end of the meeting that we can adopt. I'm happy with that. That's the
It
ultimate
would be
goal.
good if we can do that on the 12th, because for the rest of the month, I'm gone.
That would be fantastic. Let's do it on the 12th then.
I can do it right
Whatever.
now.
Will you run that for Scott? Will you share it with all of us? 'Cause I'm interested to see what it says.
I will try not to break open meeting law with information. So what I can do is I can put together a spreadsheet of the things that were provided, so everybody has all of the same
Yeah.
information.
Yeah, that's all I'm
without
asking for.
breaking
Is
it.
everyone gets the same,
Compilation of
the
them.
same
Yeah,
feedback.
compilation of
Yep.
them all, so we
Okay.
kind of get everyone has an idea, and I'll make sure that doesn't break open meeting law. And I'll verify with Amy. I don't think it does. Okay. Try not to share everyone's information without having it be on an open meeting is the concern of mine, is because I have all the information from everybody, and then I communicate that back out. That's then gonna possibly break open meeting law. But if you can send it to me before Thursday, I can give it to you on the special meeting, and that way,
I can send it to you tomorrow.
fantastic. That sounds wonderful.
Sounds good.
Cool.
Okay.
Adjournment?
Any objections? If there aren't any objections, we'll be adjourned.
We are adjourned.
We are adjourned.
Thank you.